Hello there, I'm Kristen, also known as Voolenvine, here on my YouTube channel where I chat about what I'm knitting, what I'm sewing, or whatever crafty rabbit hole I happen to be diving down. And as always, I'm so happy that you're taking some time out of your day to chat about all those things with me. And this week we are chatting sewing because I have quite a bit to share with you. I do not have a finished object, but I've got lots of sewing going on. So gather around, grab a cup of something, and let's get into things. As per usual, we have our year-long make-along that is currently underway, and that is the Histomal. No, it's not Histomal. I'm sorry, guys. It is the History Mall, History Make-Along, that is happening over in the Voolenvine Ravelry group, or in the YouTube community tab, or on Instagram. In this make-along, we're all endeavoring to make something inspired by history prior to the 1950s. So whatever decade, era, or time period you happen to be drawn to, make something inspired by it. As long as you can prove to me that it is somewhat historical, you are more than welcome to join. And so far there are so many wonderful projects circulating on those platforms, so definitely check that out. At the end of this episode, I'm actually going to do a little montage sharing some of the beautiful projects that I've seen so far from the Ravelry thread. And as I mentioned on the previous episode, I am opening up the YouTube community tab and Instagram to this make-along in lieu of what's happening over on Ravelry. They recently came out with a new look, and unfortunately it's not accessible to everyone, especially those with health issues. And yes, thank you so much to everybody who let me know that there is an option to switch back to Ravelry's original look. However, people are still having issues accessing it. And for those that are unable to access Ravelry at the moment, I do want to give those who would like to participate in the make-along another way to participate. So I hope that makes sense. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing all of your projects. Last but not least, this episode is of course sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community where you can pretty much learn anything. I use it all the time for learning new skills when it comes to photography, videography, editing. I also use it for my hand-dyed yarn business, Voolenvine Yarns, especially when it comes to productivity or social media or you name it, it's on Skillshare. So if that's something that interests you, click on the link down below and you will get to try Skillshare's platform for 2 months absolutely free. All right, on with the show, and thank you, Skillshare. As I mentioned, this episode is dedicated to sewing, so let's talk about what I'm wearing. I did not make my top. This is a top that I purchased from Target a while back. I love it. It goes with a lot of things in my handmade wardrobe. It's very versatile, but let's talk about my skirt. And you are so not going to be able to see this. I'll try and pop a photo of the full garment right here, but for now, this is what the top of the skirt looks like. It's just a very simple, flat A-line skirt with a ruffle at the bottom and some button details over here. The pattern is by McCalls. It's a new pattern that they just came out with early in the spring, I believe, of this year. So yeah, it's really simple, really straightforward, easy pattern. I think I cranked this out in, I don't know, 4 hours, save for sewing on the buttons and the buttonholes, so to speak. But yeah, just a really great, simple pattern that I really love. And the fabric is, of course, Liberty fabric. And I purchased this from Brooklyn General. And yeah, I really, really love it. I wouldn't recommend this pattern for an ultimate beginner because there are buttonholes involved and sewing on buttons, but if you are an adventurous beginner and want to dip your toes into sewing buttonholes using that button whole foot on your machine, if you have one, it's a great way to get practice, although I would recommend practicing before you do the final buttonhole on the garment. Otherwise, a really great pattern. There's some ruffling involved or skirt gathers involved, so you know, it's a really fun, quick pattern to whip up if that's your jam. So yay, highly recommend. So as I mentioned, I don't have any finished objects to share with you this week, but I did make progress yesterday on this pattern right here. And this is a vintage 1986 Butterick pattern. It is 3778 and it's supposed to be a nightgown, but I am making this to wear on a regular basis. I'm making this version right here, and this is where I am with it. So I just have the top. Right now it's just a purple and black blob with lots of pins happening, but I did sew the lace onto the neckline, so I'll try and get that in focus for you to see. So there you go, yeah. And the fabric I purchased from fabric.com. It is some dead stock voile, which is really super sheer and lightweight, but it's gonna be perfect for summer. And I did have to put this on hold because I didn't have enough lace trim. So I hopped on over to Etsy and purchased some lace trim from one of my favorite Etsy shops. Her shop is called Mary Not Martha. Not sponsored, just a diehard fan. She has some really beautiful trims, really, really affordable prices, so definitely check her out. The trim that I got is just black cotton crochet trim, and yeah, it's really nice, and I think it complements this, let me see if I can try it on. I think it complements this fabric really nicely. And, oh, I'm gonna totally stab myself if I try this on, but here goes nothing. Let me see. There are some pin tucks down the front on either side, and then I just have to add some buttons and then sew the rest of the skirt and attach everything. So it's still, it's not a quick project. This has been in the works for, I want to say, the past 3 weeks or so, only because, you know, the lace trim and yeah, just kind of wrapping my brain around working with a vintage pattern. I was actually talking with my friend Amy, who I'll talk more about later in the episode. She loves working with vintage patterns because they're more difficult, they're more involved. As I mentioned in the last sewing episode, there's so much more technique involved with the vintage patterns because people were expected to sew. People were expected to have sewing knowledge, basic sewing skills. Whereas today, not many people do sew or are taught to sew when they're younger, and they don't have basic sewing skills. So yeah, a lot of modern patterns are watered down and they do a lot of hand holding. So vintage patterns definitely are a learning curve if you are new to sewing. But I'm loving it. I'm learning so much. And again, I had to make my own bias tape, and you can see here. So you can see that, you know, the bias tape on the inside adds a really nice clean finish to the inside of the garment, as opposed to a modern pattern, which would probably just have you serge it or zigzag stitch it. So I really like that aspect of it. So yeah, it's definitely a labor of love. And yeah, I'm just taking my time with it and again, learning a lot from working with this pattern. Next up is a work in progress that I'm pretty sure I mentioned this on the last podcast, on the last sewing episode at least 2 weeks ago. I fell in love with this dress that I spotted on Target, and of course they were sold out, and then I took another look at the dress and I'm like, you know what, I could totally make that. So I Frankensteined 2 different patterns together. One is the Sundress, it's actually called the Sundress by the Avid Seamstress, an independent pattern company, and the other one is, and for the skirt part of the dress, I am using a pattern by Style Arc. So here is where I am with my muslin. I am making a muslin because I am franken-piecing 2 very different patterns by independent pattern companies. So, you know, you're working with different sizing schemes and, you know, drafting methods. And anyway, I want to make sure that it all works out before dipping into the nice fabric that I plan on using for the finished piece. But this one is kind of turning out to be a wearable muslin, I want to say. Although it is a lot shorter than I anticipated. I did not have enough fabric to make the maxi length, so this kind of just falls right at my knee, which is still a little short. I generally like dresses to fall at least below my knee, so this will still get a lot of wear, you know, when it's all said and done, but it's pretty much done. So let me see if I can stand up. So I borrowed the bodice pattern pieces from the Sundress from the Avid Seamstress, and the only alterations I made was I got rid of the button band and extended the shoulder straps to get these glorious poofy bow ties at the top. And then for the bottom, I don't know if you can see, it's just a ruffle at the bottom. The fabric is quilting cotton by Art Gallery, I believe. So I will link to it below where you can find it on fabric.com, of course, where I get all of my fabric from. But yes, because it is quilting cotton, it is a little stiff, and these bow ties are just a little, they don't have that nice drape that I wanted to have. This is the, the main fabric that I'm going to be using. A little bit out of my comfort zone because it is a kind of coppery, like I want to say a cool coppery terracotta. I don't know. It looked mauve on the website, but in person it's more of just kind of like a rust terracotta, erring on the side of the cool hues, if that makes any sense. So I think it still complements my skin tone. But yeah, it's really beautiful challis fabric by Atelier Brunette, or Brunette Atelier. I think it's Brunette, Atelier Brunette. Links down below. But it has this really nice subtle texture to it. So I think that'll be perfect for the final garment piece. So for the most part it's done. I just have to tack the zipper flap down. So it's kind of like if you're familiar with steeking a sweater, you have like that little flap of fabric that you have to whip stitch in place on the wrong side of the sweater. So kind of the same situation here. So where I installed the invisible zipper, I just have this extra strip of fabric that I just have to whip stitch into place. So once that's done, this will be done, and I can have Just a little cute dress that I can chuck on and wear around the house all summer long. I love when muslins are wearable, so yeah. So as I mentioned, my friend Amy, who you have not met before, she is wonderful. I love her. And again, she made my wedding dress Amy. And we've known each other for quite some time. And I blame her for kickstarting my sewing journey, so to speak, because I want to say maybe like 8 years ago, she helped me sew my Halloween costume. I went as Cersei from Game of Thrones, and she came over and helped me cut out the pattern pieces, showed me how to read a pattern, and she's incredible. And she recently gifted me this pretty awesome book, so I will share it with you, and that is Patternmaking. So this is Patternmaking for Fashion Design by Helen Joseph Armstrong, 2nd edition. You guys, look how it's huge. It's big. I have yet to devour this, but it is a wealth of knowledge. I mean, yeah, the illustrations in here are kind of awesome too. It shows you how to drape, it shows you how to get certain shapes and everything, and I have no words. I have no words. I can't get over the illustrations in here. Getting the correct fit and altering sizes is definitely something I still struggle with, so hopefully this will really help me out. Amy, I doubt you're watching this, but thank you. And while we're on the topic of books, some more books came into my life, sewing related. What are the odds? It's been a while since I put a dent or made progress on any of my Edwardian or Victorian inspired projects. It's kind of been on the back burner because I've been busy. Dennis and I just got back from vacation and I really have not had time to sew. Hopefully this weekend I can hunker down and get some sewing done because I'm getting a little twitchy. But speaking of Victorian and Edwardian patterns, you've probably seen it floating around Bernadette Banner's YouTube channel. And yes, by the way, I do follow Bernadette Banner on YouTube and on Instagram because every episode I always get asked, do you follow Bernadette Banner? Yes, I do. I love her channel. I think she's awesome, and I would love nothing more than to collaborate with her one day. That would be amazing. But right now I feel like I'm still learning and I'm not at her level yet. But it would still be cool to join forces at some point. Anyway, I can dream, right? I love studying the way dresses were made back in Victorian and Edwardian times. I find it so fascinating. This book has it all, from how they hand-stitched their garments, different techniques, how they added hook and eye closures to plackets. The text in here is very dense, but if you just take your time and read slowly through it, it's not as intimidating as it looks. I am able to make sense of it. But yes, just a well of information in here. There's like lining a coat or a jacket, an empire tea gown. Yeah, it's so much to be had in here. Highly recommend it if you are into historical sewing like I am. Last but not least, I went to the post office to drop off some packages, and lo and behold, on my way home, I stumbled on a ginormous pile of books on the side of the road. Or a curb, I should say. Because here in Brooklyn, when you don't want anything, you just leave it on the side of the road, and 9 out of 10, within 5 minutes, it's all gone. And yeah, I always get excited when I see books at the side of the road, because you never know what you're gonna find. It's like a little tiny treasure hunt, if you will. So I was surprised when I passed by this ginormous pile of books outside, and I was looking through it and I realized these are all sewing books. Huh. So most of them were quilting related. While I do dabble in quilting here and there, sewing garments is where my heart is at right now. So I left the quilting books alone, but I did stumble on 2 books that piqued my interest, and one of them is The Art of Manipulating Fabric. You guys, how cool is this book? It's a thick one too. But yeah, it's by Colette Wolff, and it shows you all the neat ways that you can create ruffles, ruches. I mean, I never knew that there was so much to, making flounces. Oh, guys. I mean, think of all the smocking to be had here. Knife pleats. It's got it all, guys. So this was a real treasure to stumble upon. And then this one, Sewing with Nancy. This is definitely from the 80s. Yeah, but there's still some really handy tips and tricks to be had in here. You can never have too many books on how to sew because you can always learn something new. Successful techniques for beautiful lingerie. I noticed there were a lot of lingerie topics in here, so that's really interesting. It shows you how to weight down your pattern, adding lace, applying stretch lace. So yeah, lots of lingerie tidbits in here. So yeah, definitely pick this up if you can get your mitts on one. I'll try and link to where you can get this on Amazon or something down below. The cover actually has some damage on it, so I'm gonna try and tape that up or do something to repair it. But anyway, those were really lucky finds and excited to add them to my library of sewing. All right, my friends, I'm gonna end things there. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this week. If you're new here and you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like and subscribe down below. And if you'd like to support this channel, head on over to my Patreon page. And until next time, happy knitting, happy sewing, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!